I thought I was protecting my son, but I was really exposing my husband. That's the line that still echoes in my mind every time I walk past the house next door. The one with the white roses climbing up the porch. The same porch where everything started. Back then, I believed I was just being a mother defending her child from something ugly. I didn't know the real ugliness was already living in my own home. It began on an ordinary Thursday morning. The kind that feels too quiet, even when the world outside hums along. My husband, Imran, had already left for work, or so I thought, and my son, Rafi, was dragging his school bag to the door. He was 12, tall for his age, with the kind of soft heart that bruised easily. I was buttering his toast when he said it, too softly for me to catch at first. "Ami, can you tell Mrs. Sophia next door to stop talking to me?" I looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the zipper on his bag. "She keeps calling me to her porch. Sometimes she asks questions about you. About Dad." Something in his voice made me stop mid-motion. The butter knife clinked against the plate. "What kind of questions?" He looked away. "Just weird ones. Like when Dad gets home, or if we ever fight." At first, I laughed it off. Sophia, the new neighbor, was a woman in her mid-30s, always dressed perfectly, even to water her plants. She'd moved in 2 months ago after her divorce, or at least that's what the neighborhood whispers said. I told myself she was probably lonely. Maybe she just liked talking to people. But that night, when I mentioned it to Imran, his reaction was strange. He didn't look up from his phone. "You know how kids exaggerate. Don't make a big deal out of it." There was something flat in his tone. Like a door quietly shutting. For the next week, I watched. Every morning, from my kitchen window, I could see Sophia tending to her roses. Always at the same time, Rafi left for school. She'd wave, polite, nothing more. But sometimes her eyes would linger, just a little too long. Then, one morning, I saw her step closer to the sidewalk. She said something to him. I couldn't hear what, and he stiffened. He didn't wave back. That was the moment the mother in me woke up fully. The protective one. I marched straight to her house later that day. She opened the door almost instantly, like she'd been expecting me. Her smile was sweet. Too sweet. "Good afternoon, Aisha," she said, her tone silky. "Everything all right?" "Yes," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "Actually, I just wanted to talk about Rafi. He mentioned you've been calling him over sometimes?" She tilted her head slightly as if confused. "Oh, that. He's such a charming boy. I was just being friendly." "Please don't," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "He's uncomfortable." For a second, her expression hardened, a flicker of annoyance, gone as fast as it came. "Of course," she said smoothly. I didn't mean to offend, but as I turned to leave, she added, "You're very protective of him. It's admirable. I can see where he gets his sweetness from." The words were innocent enough, but the tone wasn't. Something about it crawled under my skin. That night, I told Imran again. He sighed loudly, tossed his phone aside, and said, "You're overreacting, Aisha. She's a neighbor, not a criminal. Maybe stop imagining things?" I wanted to argue, but his tone carried that familiar finality, the same one he used whenever I brought up something he didn't want to discuss. So I dropped it. But the unease stayed. 2 days later, the real turning point came. Rafi came home pale and quiet. He went straight to his room. After dinner, I went to check on him. He was sitting on his bed, clutching his phone. "Ami." She took a picture of me. "What?" He handed me his phone. There it was. A photo of him leaving the school gate, sent from an unknown number. No message, just the picture. My stomach turned to ice. That night, I went online and reported it to the Community Safety Board. Sophia's address, her name, the incident. I even attached the photo. I thought it would scare her enough to stop, but I didn't realize what kind of truth I had just set in motion. 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. It was a police officer. He was polite, explaining they were following up on my report. I led him to the porch and showed him the message. As we talked, I noticed movement next door. Sophia standing behind her curtains, watching us. The officer promised to handle it. He asked if I had any reason to believe she might know my family personally. I said no, of course not. Why would she? Later that evening, when Imran came home, I told him about the report. His reaction wasn't what I expected. He froze. The color drained from his face. "What did you say her name was?" "Sophia," I said slowly. "The woman next door. Why?" He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting away. "Aisha, you shouldn't have done that. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? She's taking pictures of our son." But he didn't answer. He just stood there, silent, tense, until I finally said, "Do you know her, Imran?" He hesitated. Too long. And that silence was the first real clue, because it didn't sound like guilt of a neighborly misunderstanding. It sounded like fear. That night, after he went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the sofa with my cup of tea going cold, staring at the faint glow from Sophia's living room next door. She was awake too, and for the first time, I realized she wasn't just watching the neighborhood. She was watching us. The next few days were like walking on glass. Every sound, every glance, every small act felt loaded with meaning. Rafi seemed more withdrawn, shuffling past Sophia's porch as if avoiding some invisible trap. I couldn't stop thinking about that photo. Who else had it? Why did she want it? I tried to go about normal life. I cleaned the kitchen meticulously, folded laundry with precision, made sure dinner was ready when Imran came home. I smiled at him, trying to ignore the tremor in my own heart whenever he entered the room. But something had shifted. The warmth between us felt fragile, thin, like paper stretched too tight. Then, a small detail caught my attention one morning. Imran had left his jacket on the chair by the dining table, the one he always hung neatly in the closet. I noticed a faint perfume scent lingering in the sleeve. It wasn't floral, not like the body lotion I used. It was sharp, faintly sweet, like something Sophia might wear. I froze, bringing the sleeve closer, sniffing it hesitantly. My stomach twisted. I told myself I was imagining things. Surely it was another coworker, or maybe something clung to his jacket from the gym. But the thought would not leave me. Over the next week, little signs started adding up. His phone would ring in the mornings, and he'd leave the room quickly, speaking in hushed tones. Emails marked urgent appeared on his screen, and he'd close them when I walked past. And the strangest part, he was more distant, quiet, polite. But the eyes avoided mine in a way that screamed of secrets. I started paying attention to Sophia, too. She would greet me warmly when we passed in the garden, smiling with that practiced ease that never quite reached her eyes. Sometimes she'd linger on her porch when Rafi left for school, and I caught her writing something in a small notebook. Every interaction felt measured, calculated. I began to document the odd moments. A note here, a photograph there. Small things I could show if I needed to explain it. I was still trying to protect Rafi, trying to convince myself that nothing was actually happening. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One evening, Imran came home later than usual. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon, not from the kitchen, from the living room. I followed the scent subconsciously and noticed his jacket hung over the sofa, again smelling of that same perfume. My heart sank, and I confronted him gently. "Imran, whose perfume is this?" He looked at me like I had asked an impossible question. He swallowed, ran a hand through his hair, and said, Aisha, I think you're reading too much into things. No, I said firmly. I know what I'm smelling. I'm not imagining it. He avoided my eyes. His silence lasted longer than I could bear. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to Rafi's quiet breathing from the next room, thinking of all the small signs. The perfume, the hushed phone calls, the way Imran's gaze shifted when I entered the room. Something was very wrong. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about a neighbor harassing my son. It was about my own husband. A few days later, I tried to find a logical explanation. I looked at the times he left early, the days he was mysteriously unavailable, even the moments when he seemed unusually tense at home. It all pointed to someone. I decided to confront my instincts head-on. I needed proof, not just perfume or fleeting glances, but something concrete. So I started small, noting when he left, where he went, checking his phone when he showered or stepped out. I felt guilty. I hated the thought of invading his privacy. But fear for my son's safety and the growing unease over my own marriage pushed me forward. Then, the moment that shattered my last reservations happened. I had gone to pick up Rafi from school. On my way back, I drove past Sophia's house. The curtains were drawn, but I saw Imran's familiar posture in the living room, sitting on her sofa. His head tilted slightly, his hand resting on her arm, not friendly, not casual. I stopped the car. My heart raced. I blinked, unwilling to believe what I was seeing. But the figure next to him was unmistakable, Sophia, laughing lightly, leaning in toward him in a way that made my stomach knot. I pulled over, gripping the steering wheel. The world seemed to narrow. It was impossible. It had to be an illusion. My mind raced, flipping through memories. All those times I noticed the perfume, his distant eyes, the secret calls. Everything clicked into place. Tears filled my eyes. My son's safety was no longer the only concern. My husband, the man I had trusted, loved, built a life with, was betraying me in the most intimate way possible. That night, I confronted him directly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry, at least not at first. I just said quietly, firmly, "Imran, tell me the truth. I need to know." "Is it her?" He froze. I could see the weight of what he had been hiding in the slump of his shoulders. He looked at me, and for a moment I thought he might deny it. But the truth came out slowly, painfully. "Yes," he whispered. "It's Sophia. I didn't mean for it to go this far." My hands trembled as I sat down on the sofa. "Not mean for it to go this far?" I echoed. "Imran, she's our neighbor. She's harassing Rafi. You've been lying to me for months. How could you?" He swallowed hard, unable to answer. His silence spoke louder than any excuse. And at that moment, I realized the betrayal was complete. The days that followed were a blur of disbelief, heartbreak, and careful observation. I stayed calm around Rafi, never letting him sense the storm inside me. I recorded incidents, documented phone calls, and started quietly building a case, not just for my son, but for myself. I had to know everything before confronting anyone else. And then, one late evening, I saw the final confirmation. A text message from Sophia on Imran's phone. Playful, intimate, unmistakable. That's when the reality sank in fully. The woman harassing my son was not just a neighbor. She was my husband's mistress. I felt something crack inside me, a mixture of rage, betrayal, fear, and sorrow. But beneath it all, a thread of clarity appeared. This wasn't just about anger. This was about protection, about reclaiming control over my life and my family. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else. The house felt heavier, quieter, almost tense, like it knew what I had discovered the night before. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, staring at the porch next door. The roses glowed faintly in the early sun, innocent and beautiful. And yet, they had become a symbol of the deception that had crept into my life. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to confront Imran fully, and I had to be methodical. I couldn't let anger rule my actions, not yet. I had to understand everything. I waited until Rafi left for school, then asked Imran to sit down with me in the living room. His expression was unreadable, cautious. Imran, I need to hear it all. Everything. From the beginning, I said, my voice low but steady. He avoided my eyes at first. I could see his hands clenching and unclenching, the way his shoulders hunched. Finally, he exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. It started after the office thing, he began, hesitant. She came into my life at a weak moment. I never wanted to hurt you. I told myself it was temporary, but it wasn't. I didn't plan for it to become what it is now. I listened in stunned silence, feeling the pieces fall into place. The secret calls, the distant looks, the way he had been sneaking around the house. And the pictures of Rafi? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. His face fell. I didn't know she would go that far. I thought she just liked him. She said she wanted to be friendly. I didn't know she'd harass him. I can't explain it. I never meant for him to be involved. I felt a mix of fury and despair. How could he justify that? How could he think this would be acceptable? The man I had loved, the father of my child, had allowed another woman to invade our home, our lives, and our son's safety. I couldn't keep it in any longer. I stood, my hands trembling. You let her. You let her hurt our child. And for what? For yourself? For her? Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't cry out. I wanted him to feel the weight of the betrayal, the quiet, undeniable pain of watching your world shatter without warning. I'm sorry, he said finally, in a small broken voice. I don't know what to do now. The truth was worse than I had feared. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that he had allowed my son to be manipulated, to be watched, to be toyed with by the woman he had brought into our home. That betrayal cut deeper than anything else, deeper than lies or stolen moments. That afternoon, I went to Sophia's house. My hands were steady, my voice calm, but inside I was a hurricane. I knocked on the door, and when she opened, her smile faltered for the first time. Aisha, she said, as if surprised. What brings you here? I know everything, I said simply. The harassment, the pictures, the texts, and your relationship with my husband. Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear. Aisha, you don't understand. No, I interrupted. I understand perfectly. I know how long you've been sneaking into our lives, lying to my child, to me, to everyone. I know exactly what you've done. She tried to step closer, but I held up a hand. Do not. Stay there. I could see it in her face. The same arrogance, the same confidence slipping away. She realized her control had been taken from her. I've already contacted the authorities about the harassment, I continued, and you will not see Rafi again, not until he is safe, and not until this house is free from your manipulation. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She knew she had been caught. When I returned home, I sat alone for hours, letting the weight of everything settle. Imran was silent too in the other room. The man I had once trusted completely now seemed like a stranger. I thought about Rafi, about the life we had built together, and about what it would take to rebuild trust, not just between us, but within myself. I realized that betrayal doesn't just fracture relationships. It fractures your understanding of yourself, your sense of security, your perception of the people you love most. And yet, even in that darkness, a small spark remained. Clarity. I knew what had to be done. Sophia would no longer interfere in our lives. Imran had to face the consequences of his choices, and I had to protect Rafi at all costs. The next day, I went through the messages on Imran's phone, every text, every hidden photo, every secret plan. It was a painful catalog of deceit, but I documented it carefully, knowing that in truth, my calm and clarity would be more powerful than anger. Later, I confronted Imran again. This time I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I spoke with quiet authority. You will end this. Completely. No contact, no lies, no hiding. You've lost your way, Imran, and it's time to come back. if you can. For me, for Rafi. But understand this. Trust is earned, not given. He nodded slowly, the shame written across his face. For the first time, I saw the man I had married, the man capable of regret, capable of rebuilding. But I also knew it would take time, patience, and vigilance. Over the next week, the neighborhood watched the drama unfold. Sophia's absence became noticeable. The whispers started. Neighbors noticed she wasn't as visible. Her daily strolls stopped. Some asked questions, some didn't. It didn't matter. The key was Rafi's safety, and slowly, I felt the tension in our home ease, and yet, I knew the betrayal had changed me. I would never see Imran in the same way. I would never allow anyone to cross my child's boundaries again. The trust we had lost had left scars, but scars, I realized, are also reminders of survival. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The betrayal still ached, but I realized that wallowing in anger would not protect Rafi or restore my life. I had to act, thoughtfully, deliberately, decisively. First, I focused on Rafi. I couldn't allow the anxiety, fear, or confusion to consume him. I sat him down at breakfast, my hands steady as I poured orange juice into his glass. "Rafi," I said gently, "I need you to know something. There's someone next door who hasn't been kind, but you are safe. Nothing she does can hurt you, not if we stick together." He looked at me, eyes wide, then nodded silently. I saw the relief in his small shoulders relaxing, the tension in his jaw easing. It was a start. Next, I addressed Imran. I knew that confronting him angrily would lead to defensiveness. Instead, I chose precision. I laid out the facts calmly, each piece of evidence I had collected, texts, photos, phone call records. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply showed him the reality of what he had allowed. "Imran," I said, "this isn't just about you or her. This is about Rafi, and it's about our family. You need to end this completely today." He stared at the papers, his hands trembling. I know. I will. I'll cut all contact. I swear. But words weren't enough. I needed proof that actions would follow. So I set up boundaries. Sophia would be officially reported to the neighborhood committee for harassment. I would install security cameras to monitor interactions, protect Rafi, and ensure there was a record of anything untoward. I also started documenting Imran's commitments. Every conversation, every promise, every step he took toward transparency I recorded. It wasn't vindictive. It was practical. He had broken my trust, and if he wanted to rebuild it, he had to prove it through action. The next week, I reached out to the local authorities about Sophia. The police officer who had first come to the house returned for a follow-up. I presented the photo evidence, the messages, and my observations. He nodded gravely. "She's been reported for harassment before," he said. "We'll look into her activities more closely now. You've done the right thing by documenting everything." I felt a small relief, but also a surge of anger. She had invaded our lives, and now, finally, she would face consequences. Meanwhile, Imran was trying, awkwardly, to make amends. He spent more time with Rafi, explaining things in a way that didn't overwhelm him. He apologized repeatedly, not in empty words, but in presence, in effort. I watched, careful to notice sincerity versus habit. There was a part of me that wanted to lash out, scream, or throw something across the room. But I didn't. I focused instead on measured action, creating safety, rebuilding boundaries, and reclaiming my authority as a mother and as a woman who had been lied to. One afternoon, I decided to speak to Sophia directly, for the record, and to assert myself. I walked next door, confident, composed. She opened the door, a forced smile plastered on her face. "I'm here to make one thing clear," I said calmly. "You will have no further contact with my family. No more calls, no more messages, no more photos. Anything else will be reported." Her eyes flickered, a mixture of fear and defiance. "Aisha, you can't control everything," she said, trying to sound dismissive. "I don't need to control everything," I replied. "Just what affects my family." She stepped back, her carefully curated confidence cracking. And in that moment, I realized the power of measured action. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need revenge. I only needed to protect what mattered most. At home, Rafi hugged me tightly that evening. "Ami, thank you," he whispered. I held him close, feeling the weight of the past weeks melt slightly. My heart ached for what had happened, but it also swelled with pride for the strength I had found. For both of us. Imran sat quietly nearby, finally silent. I looked at him, eyes steady. "This isn't over," I said gently. "Trust is something you rebuild day by day, and I will watch every step. But if you are sincere, then perhaps we can find a way forward." He nodded, almost tearful. There was no triumph in my tone, only clarity. I wasn't punishing him. I was setting the rules for the life we would continue to share, if it could survive this. By the end of the week, Sophia had vanished from the neighborhood. Rumors swirled. Some said she moved again, others whispered about police involvement. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she no longer had access to Rafi, to our home, or to our lives. And slowly, the tension in the house began to lift. Rafi smiled more, played in the garden, and laughed at the little jokes I told him over breakfast. Imran started participating in family routines again, cautiously, carefully. I noticed the effort, the difference between words and action. Through all of this, I kept a journal. Every thought, every moment of fear, every small victory. It became my refuge, a place to process the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the slow emergence of hope. I realized that action doesn't always have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and deliberate. You don't have to scream to assert your boundaries. You don't have to break everything to protect what's precious. And in the quiet strength of measured action, I began to reclaim my life and my family. It didn't take long for the neighborhood to notice the shift. The white rose house next door had gone quiet, almost empty. Mail piled up on the porch. Curtains stayed drawn. Whispers followed Sophia's absence, a mix of curiosity and judgment. But I didn't care about gossip. I cared about what mattered most, Rafi's safety, and the truth coming to light. One Saturday morning, the community held their monthly meeting at the local community center. I had never spoken up before, preferring to remain in the background, but this time I had to. Sophia's harassment and the betrayal my family had endured needed to be addressed. It wasn't about shaming her, it was about awareness, protection, and justice. When my turn came, I stood, my voice steady, though my heart raced. "I'm here because I want to speak about neighbor harassment," I began, glancing around the room. A family should feel safe in their own home. My son was photographed, contacted, and manipulated by someone who knew our routine. It was frightening and invasive, and it's something I want our community to recognize and prevent. Heads nodded. Some women whispered quietly, relating to the story. A few men exchanged glances, some frowning, some sympathetic. I kept my words measured, recounting the events without unnecessary drama, letting the facts speak for themselves. And I want to add, I said, my gaze firm, this isn't just about strangers. Sometimes the threat comes from those we trust, people we think are harmless. It's a reminder that protecting our families requires awareness and action. Afterward, a neighbor approached me. "I had no idea she was like that," she said softly. "Thank you for standing up for your child." I smiled faintly, though inside the memory of betrayal still lingered. The relief, however, came not just from recognition, but from the fact that Sophia's actions could no longer remain in the shadows. At home, the tension had changed shape. Imran tried to help around the house more consciously, showing effort in small, concrete ways, preparing breakfast for Rafi, assisting with homework, even attending parent-teacher meetings on his own. It wasn't perfect. The trust had been fractured too deeply for that. But it was a start. One evening, I caught him staring at a photo of our family, the one from Rafi's last birthday. His eyes were soft, tinged with remorse. "I've made so many mistakes," he said quietly. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Aisha. But I want to be better. For Rafi, for us." I nodded slowly, acknowledging the sincerity in his tone. Imran, rebuilding trust is a long road, and you'll have to walk it every day. But if your actions match your words, perhaps we can move forward. It wasn't a fairy tale resolution. There were no miraculous reconciliations, no instant healing. But there was progress, the kind that matters. The kind built on accountability, transparency, and vigilance. Sophia eventually left the neighborhood altogether. I don't know where she went, and I don't want to. The important thing was that she no longer had any influence over our lives. My son could play freely in the garden again. He could walk to school without fear, and he could trust that his mother would protect him, fiercely, quietly, and deliberately. I also began to see the subtle ways in which betrayal teaches. I had learned not just about the fragility of trust, but also about my own strength. I had faced fear, heartbreak, and deception, and I had acted without losing my dignity or sense of purpose. I had protected my child. I had demanded accountability from my husband. I had confronted the threat calmly, with clarity and authority. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a change in the community as well. Neighbors started being more vigilant, more protective of one another. I began receiving messages from other parents, thanking me for speaking up, for showing that one could address a difficult personal betrayal without resorting to chaos or violence. It was a strange sort of empowerment, that from one painful story, lessons could ripple outward, affecting more lives than just mine. One evening, as I tucked Rafi into bed, he looked up at me, sleepy eyes wide. "Ami, will she ever come back?" I shook my head. "No, Beta. You're safe. We've made sure of it, and you have me, and we have each other." He smiled faintly, and in that small expression of relief, I felt a light return to my heart. Betrayal had left scars, yes, but there was also healing. There was clarity. There was protection. And above all, there was the strength to face life, even after trust is broken. I went to my window later that night, glancing at the darkened porch next door. The roses still climbed the trellis, untouched, quiet. A small breeze carried their faint scent through the air, and I breathed it in, feeling both the weight of the past and the promise of a calmer future. Betrayal had visited my home. But justice, vigilance, and deliberate action had reclaimed it. And I knew, deep in my bones, that even after heartbreak, a mother's courage could protect what mattered most. The night was quiet. Rafi was asleep in his bed, his small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of slumber. I stayed by the window, a cup of tea in my hands, listening to the faint hum of the neighborhood, the distant bark of a dog, the occasional car passing, the whisper of wind through the trees. The world felt calm, almost fragile, like a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark lake. I allowed myself to breathe fully for the first time in weeks. Betrayal had left scars that no one could see, but now, slowly, I felt the first warmth of clarity return. I thought about Sophia, the woman who had intruded into our lives, the one who had threatened my son's safety. She was gone, removed from our home, from Rafi, from the small world I worked so hard to protect. And yet, the absence of chaos did not erase the past. I moved through the house carefully, checking that doors were locked, windows secure, and cameras functioning. It was more than precaution. It was ritual, a way to reclaim control over the space that had felt invaded. Every small task, every measured action, reminded me that I had agency, that I was no longer helpless in the shadow of betrayal. The next morning, Rafi came bounding into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. He yawned, stretched, and smiled at me with that innocent glow that can melt any lingering anger. "Ami, can we have pancakes today?" he asked, his small voice bright, unburdened. I smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through me. "Of course, Beta. The biggest pancakes I can make." As I prepared the batter, I noticed how his hands moved carefully around the utensils, how he paused to sniff the vanilla scent and the cinnamon I added for flavor. These small sensory details, the smell of cooking, the sound of his laughter as he poured syrup unevenly, grounded me. They reminded me that life, even after betrayal, could still hold beauty, joy, and love. When Imran entered the kitchen, I noticed a tentative change in him. He moved quietly, almost reverently, as if aware of the fragility of the new equilibrium we were building. "Good morning," he said softly, avoiding the mistakes of too familiar familiarity that had once masked deceit. "Morning," I replied, calm but measured. I didn't reach for sarcasm or anger. Instead, I offered a nod of acknowledgement. He returned it, a subtle gesture of tentative reconciliation. We ate breakfast together, the air filled with the smells of pancakes, syrup, and the faint aroma of coffee. The conversation was careful, cautious. Imran asked about Rafi's school day, about the assignments he was struggling with, and about the upcoming sports event. I answered, brief but polite, careful not to let emotions spill over, yet not hiding warmth where it was earned. Later, as I sat with Rafi doing his homework, I noticed how Imran watched from across the room, quietly observing, not intruding. It struck me then how delicate trust can be, easily broken, painfully difficult to rebuild, yet possible if approached with patience, transparency, and sincerity. Over the following weeks, I focused on rebuilding our routines. I involved Rafi in small tasks around the house, helping with laundry, setting the table, even helping me plant flowers in the backyard. These were not just chores. They were lessons in resilience, care, and reclaiming life after chaos. Imran, too, made tangible efforts. He attended parent-teacher conferences alone, spent weekends helping Rafi with projects, and even took over the grocery run so I could rest. Each action was deliberate, a quiet proof of intention. He never rushed apologies or tried to shortcut accountability. He simply acted in ways that reinforced trust slowly, step by step. One afternoon, I caught myself observing him quietly. He was kneeling in the garden, carefully pruning roses, the sun casting warm light across his face. It struck me, for the first time in months, that he was present, truly present, and not hiding behind deceit. The sight brought a mixture of relief, sorrow, and cautious hope. I reminded myself that healing was not linear, that scars remain, but that careful nurturing could allow life to flourish again. The community around us had changed subtly, too. Neighbors were kinder, more vigilant, and more openly supportive. A few parents came to me privately, thanking me for speaking out at the meeting weeks ago. They shared stories of their own struggles, little invasions, harassment, or deception, and expressed relief that someone had taken action responsibly, without escalation or public shaming. It was empowering, in a quiet, reflective way. I realized that my actions, while deeply personal, had a ripple effect. They reminded me that courage is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is measured, patient, and deliberate, like the slow planting of seeds that eventually bloom. One evening, as Rafi slept, I sat with Imran on the porch. The air was cool, filled with the scent of evening jasmine. We spoke quietly about the past weeks, about mistakes, about what it meant to be accountable. "I know I can't undo what I did," he said softly, "but I want to try, for you. For Rafi, I want to be worthy of the trust you give me." I looked at him, the man who had betrayed me, yet was trying, painfully, imperfectly, humanly, to make amends. "Imran, trust isn't rebuilt in a day," I replied gently. "It's a daily choice, and I will watch your actions, not just listen to your words. But I see your effort, and that counts for something." He nodded, eyes moist. There was no drama, no shouting, just the quiet weight of recognition and responsibility. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Rafi laughed freely in the garden, played soccer with friends, and came to me with little stories from school. Imran participated cautiously but sincerely in family life, and I learned to find joy again, small joys, quiet moments, and deliberate peace. I began writing again, documenting the entire journey in a journal. My observations, my emotions, the lessons learned. I wrote about betrayal, vigilance, courage, and restoration. I wrote about the importance of protecting children, of setting boundaries, and of demanding accountability without losing dignity. I reflected on the moral of the story often. Betrayal can fracture a life, but deliberate, measured action can reclaim it. Revenge is tempting, but justice, courage, and protection carry far greater power. And most importantly, love and trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, slowly, deliberately, and wisely. One evening, as I tucked Rafi into bed, he whispered softly, "Ami, will everything really be okay?" I kissed his forehead, inhaling the faint scent of his shampoo and clean pajamas, and smiled gently. "Yes, Beta. We are safe. We are strong, and no one can take that from us." I lingered a moment at his door, listening to his even breathing. Outside, the night was calm. The world was not perfect, but our little home had found peace again, cautiously, slowly but truly, and I knew, deep in my bones, that even after heartbreak, betrayal, and fear, a mother's courage could protect what mattered most. The days that followed felt like walking through fog, cautious, uncertain, yet strangely invigorating. I had discovered a depth of strength I didn't know I possessed. Every time Rafi laughed freely in the garden, I felt a flicker of hope. The betrayal still throbbed beneath my ribs, but I could breathe again without that knot of anxiety tightening my chest. Rafi was my anchor. Each morning, I watched him get ready for school with meticulous care, checking his uniform, tying his shoelaces, smoothing his hair. I noticed little things I had taken for granted before. The way he hummed while brushing his teeth, the small tremble in his voice when he recounted a story from class, the pride in his eyes when he showed me a drawing. These details became sacred moments, reminders that life continued, and that protection sometimes came in quiet, attentive love. Imran tried, and I acknowledged it. He didn't rush apologies or demand forgiveness. Instead, he started small, preparing breakfast occasionally, walking Rafi to school when I couldn't, listening without interruption, acknowledging his mistakes without defensiveness. I observed him like a cautious gardener, noting whether he was sincere, whether his words matched actions. And slowly, subtly, I began to see pieces of the man I had once loved, standing accountable, humbled by his own failings. One afternoon, as Rafi played in the backyard, I found Imran kneeling beside the roses, pruning them gently. The sun lit his face in soft golden light. I watched, remembering all the nights I had cried in silence, all the tension that had gripped the house. I realized then, the process of healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about planting seeds for a future where trust could grow again, carefully, deliberately. I began documenting our days in a journal, a ritual I hadn't started before. I wrote down every small victory, every moment of laughter, every tiny act of trust. The entries weren't just notes. They were my lifeline, a reminder that progress is slow, but possible. I also made a conscious effort to talk to Rafi openly, in age-appropriate ways. One evening, while we folded laundry together, he asked quietly, "Ami, why did she do that to me?" I knelt beside him, folding his tiny socks, and looked into his eyes. "Sometimes people make bad choices, Beta. They hurt others to get what they want. But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean we can't be strong and safe." He nodded solemnly, his small hand gripping mine. I could feel the weight of his trust in me, and I swore silently to never let it waver again. Imran and I had long, quiet conversations at night after Rafi was asleep. We didn't shout or argue. Instead, we discussed mistakes, responsibilities, and the small ways in which trust could be rebuilt. "I don't know if I can ever forgive fully," I admitted one night, my voice low, "but I want to try, for Rafi and for us. But it will take time. Every day, every action counts," he nodded, eyes glistening. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't deserve it, but I'll earn it day by day." And he did. He didn't make grand gestures or try to shortcut accountability. He attended Rafi's school events, helped with homework, cooked meals, and slowly became present in ways that were undeniable. Outside our home, life settled slowly. Neighbors noticed Sophia's absence and began to whisper quietly among themselves. Some approached me privately, sharing stories of their own small fears and anxieties. I realized my courage, my careful, deliberate action, had rippled beyond our family. I had become an example of how to act decisively without drama or chaos, and it gave me a quiet sense of empowerment. I began walking through the neighborhood with Rafi, hand in hand. We stopped by friends' homes, exchanged greetings with parents at the school gate, and talked to teachers who had noticed Rafi's renewed sense of safety. With each interaction, I felt the tension lift further. The betrayal, once so heavy, had become a reference point, a memory, a lesson, rather than a constant, suffocating weight. Evenings became a sacred time. We would sit together in the living room, Rafi sprawled on the carpet with his homework or drawing, Imran quietly nearby reading the newspaper, and I preparing tea or snacks. We didn't speak of Sophia unless Rafi asked. Even then, I kept explanations simple, age-appropriate, and reassuring. One night, I found myself staring at the ceiling long after Rafi had gone to sleep. I reflected on the journey. Betrayal, fear, anger, the painstaking process of rebuilding trust, and the small victories of daily life. I realized that true healing isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's in the attention you give to the people you love, the small acts of protection and care, the honesty that replaces lies. And slowly, over weeks and months, I noticed a transformation. Imran's presence felt honest. Rafi's laughter returned to its full warmth. I felt my own strength, not just as a mother, but as a woman who had faced betrayal and emerged capable, vigilant, and resilient. The mornings became our sanctuary. I would wake before Rafi, the kitchen filled with the quiet hum of the fridge and the aroma of brewing coffee. The sun spilled golden light across the tiled floor, painting warmth on the walls. I would prepare breakfast carefully, placing each plate with a small smile, knowing that these moments of ordinary care were slowly healing what had been broken. Rafi would toddle in, hair sticking up in tiny tufts, eyes still heavy with sleep, and grin at me. "Ami, can we make waffles today?" I laughed softly, tousling his hair as he ran past me to set the table himself. The simple rituals, pouring juice, buttering toast, counting syrup drops, became acts of reclaiming life. The house felt alive again, safe and filled with laughter. Each small moment reminded me that fear could not define our days. Imran joined us occasionally, still tentative, still measured. He never tried to rush the healing process. Instead, he showed care quietly, pouring milk into Rafi's cereal with a steady hand, asking gentle questions about homework, listening without judgy. Rafi's little gestures, how he adjusted his own tone and posture to show respect for the space I had carved. One afternoon, I decided to take Rafi to the local park. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass. He ran ahead, laughter trailing like a melody behind him, while I watched from the bench, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. Imran followed at a slow pace, glancing at us with a mixture of pride and lingering guilt. "Mom, can we try the swings?" Rafi called, running toward the playground. I nodded, letting him go, my heart swelling at the sight of his carefree joy. I turned to Imran. "You see him happy again?" "Yes," he admitted quietly. "And I'm glad. I want him to feel safe, always." I studied him, weighing sincerity against past mistakes. Trust had been fractured, yes, but effort was visible, undeniable. It would take time to fully forgive, but these moments, small, ordinary, grounded, were the threads from which trust could be rewoven. Evenings at home were quieter, more intimate. We would sit together in the living room, Rafi sprawled with crayons, Imran reading quietly in the corner, and I absorbed in my journal. Writing became a ritual, a way to process the labyrinth of emotions that had defined the past months. I recorded everything: heartbreak, anger, relief, and the subtle moments of progress. Sometimes I paused, listening to the silence between us. The absence of chaos felt almost alien yet comforting. The betrayal that had threatened to destroy us was no longer at the forefront. It had become a lesson, a shadow that reminded us to be vigilant, but also to cherish peace. I also began incorporating new routines with Rafi to strengthen his sense of security. We built a little garden in the backyard, planting flowers and vegetables. Every morning he would check the soil, water the plants, and whisper small secrets to them, as if they were confidants. I watched him, smiling at the innocence of it, while quietly sensing the importance of these rituals, teaching him patience, care, and observation, and giving him a sense of safety after weeks of uncertainty. Imran occasionally joined, kneeling beside us to dig holes or plant seeds. It was awkward at first. Our interactions were cautious, careful, but slowly, he learned to be present without overstepping, to support without controlling, and to show commitment without words alone. Night times were the most reflective. After Rafi slept, Imran and I would talk quietly on the porch, the cool night air carrying the scent of jasmine. No shouting, no recrimination, just conversation and introspection. "I still feel guilty," he admitted one night, his voice low, almost lost in the darkness. "For everything. For not protecting him, for lying, for not being myself." I reached for his hand, placing it gently over mine. "Guilt doesn't erase what's broken, Imran, but actions can rebuild it. You're showing me you can be responsible, that you can protect him and respect our family. That counts." He looked at me, tears glistening, and nodded. It was a small, fragile step, but a step nonetheless. Over the following months, our home transformed from a place of tension and anxiety to one of cautious peace and predictability. We celebrated small victories. Rafi completing a school project, Imran making a thoughtful gesture, neighbors offering quiet acknowledgement of our resilience. The house smelled of fresh bread in the morning, of clean laundry drying in the sun, of jasmine and rain-damp earth. We laughed over burnt pancakes, teased each other over minor mishaps, and occasionally cried together, not from fear, but from the relief of healing. The seasons changed slowly, carrying with them a quiet rhythm that mirrored our healing. Spring brought new blooms, summer offered long, golden afternoons, and I found myself noticing life with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The house, once heavy with tension and fear, now hummed softly with laughter, routine, and trust. Rafi ran through the garden, chasing butterflies that flitted over the tulips and roses. His laughter rang freely, a sound I had feared I'd never hear again. Each time I saw him smiling without worry, I felt a softening in my heart, a release of the lingering pain from the months before. He had regained a sense of safety, of belonging, of home. And I had regained a part of myself I thought was lost forever. Imran had changed too. The journey had been long, painstaking, and quiet. He did not attempt to erase his mistakes with grand gestures or empty words. Instead, he acted consistently with small, deliberate steps, helping Rafi with homework, preparing meals, engaging in honest conversations, and supporting me in ways that felt sincere rather than performative. His presence became steady, a subtle anchor rather than a stormy tide. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long golden shadows across the living room, I found myself sitting with Rafi and Imran, all three of us quietly observing the peace we had created together. Rafi held a crayon in his hand, absent-mindedly drawing shapes, while Imran flipped through a book, occasionally glancing at me with a tentative smile. I watched them both, my chest tightening not from pain, but from the gratitude of survival and the resilience of trust. I thought back to the dark days, the discovery of the betrayal, the fear for my son's safety, the quiet rage and heartbreak I had carried. Those memories had shaped me, yes, but they no longer ruled me. Instead, they became teachers. I had learned that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is deliberate, measured, and patient. I had learned that betrayal, while shattering, can reveal the depths of one's own strength. And I had learned that healing is a process, not a destination. In the following months, I took deliberate steps to ensure our lives were protected, and yet full. I began volunteering at Rafi's school, quietly advising parents about vigilance and child safety. I shared my story in small circles, not to shame anyone, but to show that even in betrayal, measured action and courage could reclaim peace. My words, my advice, my presence became a quiet beacon to other families who might be navigating their own struggles. I also reconnected with old friends, slowly, cautiously, sharing laughs and conversations I had once abandoned. I took long walks in the evenings, breathing in the jasmine and the fresh-cut grass, noticing how life could be beautiful even after trauma. These moments, small and ordinary, became rituals of reclamation, of self, of home, of family. One quiet night, after Rafi had drifted into sleep, Imran and I stood on the porch, the air cool, carrying the faint scent of the garden in bloom. I looked at him, seeing the man who had betrayed, and yet also seeing the man who had tried, humbly and patiently, to rebuild what he had broken. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight," I said softly, letting the words carry the weight of months of reflection. "But I see your effort, and that counts." "More than you know," he nodded, voice low. "I will spend every day proving it. I don't deserve it, but I will earn it, even slowly." I smiled faintly, the wind brushing my hair. That's all anyone can ask. Action over words, care over excuses, patience over instant results. I turned inward that night, reflecting on the moral of our story. Life is unpredictable. Trust can be shattered in an instant. Betrayal can pierce the deepest parts of our hearts. But courage, vigilance, and deliberate action can reclaim what was lost. Healing is neither dramatic nor instant. It is quiet, slow, and often mundane. Yet within the mundane, within the careful acts of love, protection, and honesty, life flourishes again. I realize that revenge is fleeting, but accountability lasts. Justice is not always about punishment. Sometimes it is about learning, growing, and creating boundaries that protect the innocent. And love thrill. Resilient love is built on consistency, honesty, and the courage to face imperfection with dignity. In the mornings, I now wake to Rafi's laughter, the smell of fresh toast, the soft light of the sun spilling across the floor. I watch him eat, brush his teeth, pack his school bag, and step into the world with confidence. I am present for him fully as he grows, learns, and trusts again. Imran, too, continues to show up. Not perfectly, not without flaw, but with sincere effort, mindful presence, and an understanding that trust is a daily gift, not a guarantee. Together, we have built a new rhythm, a fragile but thriving harmony of life, love and responsibility, and I have learned, more profoundly than I could have imagined, that even after betrayal, heartbreak, and fear, the human heart can rebuild. Courage, patience, vigilance, and love can restore what seemed irreparably broken. Would you have been able to act as I did? Could you have faced betrayal, protected your child, and demanded accountability while keeping your dignity intact? Life is full of unexpected trials. Sometimes the ones we trust most will fail us, intentionally or not. But it is in how we respond, with calm courage, deliberate action, and the careful rebuilding of what matters, that our true strength emerges. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or your own lessons learned in the comments. Let's remind each other that even after heartbreak, healing and strength are possible. If this story touched you, consider subscribing for more real life, emotionally immersive stories, stories of courage, betrayal, and ultimately, hope.